Today we'll continue our season 5, talking about how to unlock growth. And I've teased the topic AI agents over the last few episodes. We're going to go deeper. In fact, we're going to talk about AI agents in the following context. How do you future-proof growth? Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Adam. Really excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to walk our audience through your thinking, but I'd like to give them a little context first. You're in higher ed. Let's jump into it. What are you seeing in terms of AI's use in higher ed today?
So it's really interesting. We specifically, I'm in marketing for higher education, and recently we participated in a survey that we collaborated with an association that we are closely aligned with, and we went out to higher ed experts in marketing and enrollment management and asked them what they were seeing and how they were using AI in their marketing and enrollment management processes and practices. What we found was most of them are not actually using AI, and yet most of them recognize that there's value and opportunity in using AI in their marketing. So there's a real disconnect between the opportunity and the actual practice or participation right now
You,
among higher ed experts.
you know what? I don't think it's just higher ed experts. I'm going to use my data over the last, let's say, 3 months. I've talked to 50, 60 marketing leaders, and a small percentage have adopted. Most have embraced, but there is a gap between embracing and adoption. So before we talk about, go further, Eric, why do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a gap between those who agree they should but don't?
This is a great question. I believe that most of them are, I think there's a number of challenges that they're facing. One is they're not quite sure where to start. And two, I think particularly in academia, there's a bit of a pushback between, they're afraid that there's going to be a disconnect between the authenticity of using AI and what they want to do, as well as some general larger concerns around AI in education, right? Traditionally, education is a slightly slower moving industry, if you will, in terms of adoption of certain things. And I think that there's a real hesitancy there in making sure that they keep the humans in the learning process.
I'll just add one more piece from what I see, and you already mentioned it. There's just so much out there, so difficult to figure out where to focus. And then everything has become so much easier, and yet you're lost in the noise.
Yeah, there's almost so many possibilities and opportunities. You don't really know where to start first.
Yeah. Well, that gives us a little bit of the industry you're in. Eric, if you could, for our audience, could you also talk about where you are as an organization? I believe you've gone through acquisitions, and that has created an impact in terms of how you're approaching marketing. So maybe we've got the industry focus or context. Now let's do organizational context, and then we'll make our way into how you're adopting AI.
Yeah, so the company I work for, EducationDynamics, we've been in higher education marketing for a number of years, 35 years total, when you're talking about through acquisitions and so forth, the experiences that we have. Our organization is specifically focused on what we call the modern learner, online, adult, non-traditional students. That's really where we focus our energy and efforts in helping schools with their marketing and enrollment management. And as I mentioned, and you mentioned our acquisition process. We actually are built of a couple of different organizations that have come together over time through mergers and acquisitions. Really specifically, a major one that happened for us was in the fall, early winter of 2019. We merged two teams, the traditional EducationDynamics team with another team that we brought in from another organization. And it was really a little bit of a culture clash that also happened right before COVID hit. So what we recognized was there were a lot of alignments. There were a lot of things that were similar between the organizations and the teams, but we also had to merge those two organizations and some really significant differences to create one coherent team and organization.
It's difficult. Post-acquisition, I used to be an investment banker many years ago. Most acquisitions fail, right? And a lot of it is about how do you create the right culture, how do you unify toward a mission. So Eric, when you think about growth strategies, unifying these organizations, these teams, what is most important in how to align toward the growth strategies?
I think the most important thing for us in particular was just aligning around the mission and aligning around our clients and serving our clients. Once we got to that point where we were really focused on how do we make everything about the clients and aligning with their mission and with our mission, I think it becomes a lot easier because then any of the smaller things that stand in the way, there's still friction, but you can break through those because you get down to the point of focusing on what's best for our clients, what's best for our team, and really what's the mission of what we're trying to accomplish.
Bullseye, right? Mission at the center, your organization, all of the teams, plus the clients. Okay, I can't hold us back anymore. We got to dive into AI. I want to talk about AI. So, Eric, what's the role of AI in your marketing today? And we could talk about it from people, from process, from technology. Kind of most that are listening are exactly what you described in the beginning. They have embraced, they have not adopted, so they're listening in order to learn from you.
Yeah, sure. So a little bit more context. First, we are a marketing agency. My role is outside of that. So I do our corporate marketing, run the Marcom team here at Education Dynamics. And so we've got kind of two different places where we're using it. But very early on, both myself and our VP of marketing that runs the agency, both of us really jumped into this and realized that this was an opportunity for us both strategically and organizationally. And it's just something also that interests us individually as well. So we've kind of taken a parallel approach where they are using within the agency AI in a number of different ways and actually had been using it for several years. We can talk a little bit more about that, but that's sort of outside of the day-to-day work that I do. But then my team intentionally has also been developing it and using it in different ways than what the agency is doing. So there's a couple of different components to it, especially when you're talking about within marketing. As I mentioned, the agency team had been using it for a number of years. Really specifically, if you look at like the larger platforms, advertising platforms like Google Ads, LinkedIn, Meta, there's a lot of AI elements that have been built into those platforms over a number of years, right? So when you're talking about lookalike audiences or retargeting or real-time bidding or performance max advertising on Google, there are some machine learning and AI driven elements that have been in those platforms for a number of years. And so what's really important for us is to make sure that we've got the data correct to feed into those algorithms to help us better optimize and improve those and take advantage of the robots, the machines that they have running to improve that. Where we come into play then is becoming more of, adding the creative elements to it, adding the strategy to it, and making sure that the data is really on point so that the machines have what they need to be able to optimize and do what they do well.
And Eric, how do you see AI versus AI agents? Let's begin to kind of slowly bridge the gap for those who are listening. When I say an AI agent, because I brought it up previously, and I find there's a lot of confusion about this term. I don't even know if there is a clear, universally accepted definition. But when I say an AI agent to you, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So to your point, I think that it's not really clearly defined for everyone, and I think everyone uses it a little bit differently. When I think about an AI agent, I'm thinking about how we have tuned or leveraged or built specific tools within AI to be able to accomplish either specific tasks or customize the messaging and the output that we're getting in some way. So there's a couple of different ways that we use it. And that really is where we kind of are thinking about the difference between large language models and when we're plugging into them via an agent. How are we building those agents, or how are we thinking about the different ways that we're using those tools and the prompts and the instructions that we're giving them?
Yeah, a couple of months ago, I was introduced to this really simplest way to think about it is we're living now in AI co-pilots helping you with a task, and we're preparing for AI agents where autonomously a series of actions could be taken toward an objective autonomously.
Sure.
So I think you illustrated that perfectly. Have you already begun to roll out AI agents? Do you have a specific use case or a couple of use cases you could share with the audience? Because I'm very excited about a particular use case around brand voice, and we'll get to that in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm excited to have that conversation as well. So our agency is using specific agents that they are tuning for certain clients to make sure that they're matching the brand voice and getting the deliverables that they need out of the agents that we've created. On my team, we have strategically, as I mentioned, we kind of go on parallel but different paths. They have really been leveraging ChatGPT a little bit more, whereas I've been using Google Gemini a bit more on my team. It gives us the ability to use both platforms and have that structure in both platforms, so that as new technology adapts, we're able to have someone that has an understanding and is keeping up to date on those two major platforms. We've got other players or other people on the team that are using, Claude or Perplexity or different things for different ways. But looking at the two major platforms, that's how we're using them right now. The way that my team, so the reason why I say that is because within the agency using ChatGPT, they're able to create custom agents that they are tuning and building into ChatGPT. Still waiting for Google's promised gems to come out. It obviously is taking a little bit longer than many of us thought that it might take when they announced that it was going to be something that was coming out in May. But in the meantime, we're still creating what I would consider to be custom agents in the prompts that we're writing. So when we're looking at doing repeatable tasks, we're still creating, if it's not a one-time use, it's a reload every time kind of an agent that we're providing based on the prompts and the instructions that we're giving to to Gemini when we're using that.
And I think for those who are listening who are already experimenting, and if you're not, so you understand, it's very time consuming to load prompts that are good, that are detailed. Yeah, we may be asking, hey, what is a tree? Terrible example. But like that's a clear one way. But if we're asking to create a campaign, we may need to load pages and pages, documents and documents, brand voice, and all of that from a prompt perspective is a lot of copy paste time consuming. So instead, creating a custom ChatGPT where it's already available, and as you start to use it, you start to see the hallucinations, deviations. You go in and you update the prompts. And I think, Eric, that would be kind of rudimentary AI agent. For some, I think they would push back and say that isn't really an AI agent. That's just a more sophisticated prompt. For me, I would say that is, for what we're doing, a series of what we're asking a prompt to do. And I want to lend that plane into the importance of brand voice. It is my opinion that for anyone involved in marketing at scale, for call it middle market and above organizations, brand voice is a major consideration and a major time suck in terms of aligning on brand. Eric, what's your point of view on the importance of brand voice in developing strategies and campaigns?
Yeah, brand voice is critical, right? Like it's everything. It's our brand, and with that, it's really important that it's authentic. For that reason, we don't use large language models to write final content or copy for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're using it to help us inform the way that we're structuring content. For example, we're using it to help us evaluate the content that we've written, help us create outlines and so forth. But it is not writing the content for us, because I want to make sure that we keep and maintain that voice, particularly in the industry that we're in. It's really, really important for us. It's critical for us that we are authentic and consistent with that voice. And we have a particular voice that we want to make sure that we're communicating. And we necessarily try to thread a pretty small needle when we're talking about the voice that we're using. So specifically, because we're working with people that are in academics, we're definitely informative. We're a little bit more serious. Like you're not going to see emojis or anything like that in our writing. We have some other really specific rules that we have in the writing that we produce. But we also want to be approachable and warm, and so that's a balance that is really difficult, in particular if you're trying to ask a large language model to write that.
And I would like to, Eric, clarify. I get that there's a human in the loop. Prompt output, review, evaluate, make sure it's authentic. But that doesn't mean you're not loading your brand voice to get the starting point. You're still loading your brand voice and then saying, okay, let me now make sure it's authentic and we have a human that's giving it the emotion and that authenticity.
Yeah, that's accurate. But even beyond that, like the outputs typically that we get, are more. So here's our process. For example, if we're writing a blog post, for example, right? We'll get something that begins with an outline of the content that we're going to write. But where we're building an agent, for example, is once we get that outline, our team is then writing that content and that audience. Then we have a separate prompt that we load into the document that includes access to example blog posts that we've written in the past and our brand voice restrictions and requirements and so forth, examples of all of that. We load that in, and then we give it the new finished, what we consider to be the finished article, and we ask it to review and score that against our brand voice standards and against prior examples that we provide. And we provide both high quality examples and lower quality examples with scores of each of those, and we ask it to provide us with a score and recommendations. So that's how we're using AI to evaluate our voice and make sure that we're staying consistent with it. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely makes sense. That's fantastic. So we've got multiple custom chat GPTs with human in the loop. They have different functions, different instructions. I don't want to call it training because it's not real training, it's instructions for that prompt. And you're saying, okay, I'm ready for this step, next step, and the following step. That's excellent. So Eric, in that spirit, I want us to maybe go a little further from a vision perspective. It seems to me we're moving toward, let's call this a workflow, a very complex workflow. And let's look at a blog post. I think most who are not in marketing would look at a blog post and be like, it's a blog. No, it's not a blog. It's the process that it requires is you may start at a strategic communication framework. You may then look at a persona. You may then look at the brand voice. Then you may talk about the sentiment of that persona in this moment in time. As you move through content and the creative, you then get into SEO optimization. All the way through, the number of steps that are required for a blog to be done right are pretty complex. Would you agree, or would you have a different?
No, absolutely. And I think one thing that's really critical that you're missing is as a Marcom leader and a Marcom team, particularly working within an agency, we're marketing generalists. That is to say, like, I have a manager that's focused on top of funnel SEO. She does a lot of the digital marketing and so forth very well. But relative to our agency team, where we've got a buyer who's focused specifically on Google Ads specifically, or a number of them, and that's the only thing that they do, we're much more generalist because we have a number of different pieces that we touch. But yet we're the ones that are producing that content. We have to also work with those experts, whether it's somebody that's on our marketing team, or whether it's somebody that's in our market research team, or whether it's somebody that's in our student success coaching team. They're the experts in those individual arenas. And so we also have to work with them to get that information. So it's also informing that and making sure that there's that level of expertise that's provided as well.
So well said. And then depends on the industry, there may be government or governance. There could be regulatory implications to ensure that there isn't a liability being created. How could those steps be part of this AI agent workflow yet? So it's almost like automation without risking authenticity being lost. And this is a new era we're in, where this will be an ongoing question, almost a philosophical question as we're getting into personalization and so on. Sorry, Eric, I'm just really, really excited about this topic. I wasn't 3, 4 months ago, but the further I've been diving in, I've gotten really passionate. Uh, Anything else there on the kind of AI agent flow or the brand voice that maybe you're holding back that will be helpful for the audience?
No, I think I think the key, as you were mentioning, is like leveraging these tools to help you in terms of efficiency and in improving the outputs. But you still have to be like the brand police, the authenticity police, right? So no matter what, when you're using this, you cannot cede creativity to the agents. You cannot cede your brand to the agents. It's your responsibility to make sure that that's maintained. And it's increasingly, important as these technologies come in, that there is that human that's putting that critical thought to it.
Would you say that that would be the biggest challenge to being successful driving growth as we're adding more and more automation? Do you think it's about authenticity? I'm not saying that's a small thing, that's a huge thing. It's monster, but are there other challenges do you anticipate?
I think the other thing that is in danger of being lost is creativity, right? So, an agent, a large language model, is really good at reproducing what already exists. It's not really good at creating something new because that's not what it does, right? Like it uses an algorithm to figure out what word should come next. So I think that's the other challenge that people run into is you also have to continue to apply the creativity to the output and so forth. So I think those two things, the authenticity and the creativity, are the two things that I'm really thinking about and concerned about is how do we maintain that in the work that we're producing?
Eric, what about the folks that are concerned, similar to you, but maybe are resistant to AI? Are you experiencing some of a lot of the leaders that I speak with, that seems to be the first hurdle. And I'm also experiencing that within our organization. And I mean that in the most, like I get it. Creatives, the folks that have been in content world their whole lives, this is their skill. And the ask now is to do what? To embrace technology in order to change the way they approach content generation. That's transformative ask. So the resistance is natural. Do you see the same?
Absolutely. I think that there are a lot of people that are concerned about within our team, within the industry, what does this mean for me personally, right? Like if I adopt this, am I just showing my supervisor, my organization, how I can be replaced by AI? And again, I don't think that we're to the point where that's going to happen across the board. But I certainly do understand and appreciate the fact that, as you mentioned, creatives and so forth, right? There is a challenge there, and it's an opportunity as well for us to reimagine, how do they use these tools a little bit different to continue to apply their creativity and apply something that's unique and new to the work that they're doing.
Awesome. Eric, what about the leaders that are listening who are like, okay, let's do this. What other advice would you give them? Is it about themselves experimenting? Is it about learning more as a leader? Is this a new critical skill to have as a leader to stay up to date on AI? What other advice would you give them?
I would say start experimenting with it and understanding what the capabilities and possibly more importantly what the limitations are, right? Continue to push and see if I ask it to do this, what's going to be the output that I get, and critically evaluating that. I think that's the first thing to do, right? Is that everyone should be in some way spending 30 minutes of 15 minutes, whatever you have available to you, to at least play with some prompts, and then really get curious about what happens if you change and improve that prompt process. It's quite interesting if you think about early 2023 when ChatGPT first came out, there was this big discussion about, oh, there's a whole new burgeoning industry of prompt engineering, right? And so now we're going to have all of these people who have a full-time job of engineering prompts to get the stuff out. Well, what happened was the platforms became better and better at dealing with more ambiguous prompts. And so that is going to continue to evolve, right? Like the prompts that you feed them, as you were mentioning earlier, like, what is a tree and getting a picture out, that's one thing. But then, as I mentioned, some of the prompts that we're writing end up being, 8, 10, 12 pages long that we're loading into the large language model to come up with the outputs that we want. So figuring out what's the difference between those, right? Like how much information do I have to give it and what's going to be the outcome there? What happens if I start with a small ask and then I start to iterate and build on that ask? I think that's the other kind of hack that I learned fairly early on, especially is in the early days when it really couldn't do more than a couple hundred words without starting to hallucinate. Building small and building on top of that certainly provides different outputs.
Amazing. My last question, Eric, and we started with talking about higher education and how AI is being used today. What would you say is the future of AI in higher education? And I say future, I gotta be careful. Like if we say 10, 20 years out, most people, I can't think that far out anymore. Yeah. 2 years ago, I couldn't predict where we are now. So when I say future, maybe we give it a, I don't know, 2-year time frame?
So I'll talk about it from the student perspective, because I think that that's really a key element to think about for higher education, right? Like how do we make it more student-centric? What we see in our surveys of what we, again, call the modern learner, they want to make decisions faster. They want to be able to be served when they're interested in something. So, someone might decide that they're going to go into, that they want to go back and get an MBA, for example, right? Well, unlike a traditional undergraduate student where it might take 2 or 3 years for them to make that decision, they're making that decision in 2 months. And oh, by the way, they're working while they're doing that. So while you're working as a school, they're also working. Many of them spend a lot of time on the school's website before they ever reach out. I think where we're going in the future is going to be more personalized content and engagement on demand for those students, right? So whether that be serving up different information based on the individual that's doing that service, or having AI generated or automated chatbots that are able to provide that information for them, seamlessly engaging with them and nurturing them on their time. And that might be late at night. That might be in a very short window. They might want to make their decision in a couple of weeks. You've got to be able to match that in terms of your cadence and your engagement and the information that you're providing them, because they're going to make that decision very quickly with or without you. So I think really what we're going to continue to see is more personalization in terms of the experience. And this is primarily on the, on the marketing and the enrollment side of it. But I think you'll probably see that carry over to the education experience as well.
Right message, right person, right time.
Absolutely.
Eric, this has been wonderful. Thank you for this really awesome discussion about AI agents. And for those listening, this is how you really future-proof your function.
Adam, I had a great time. Thank you very much.
Over and out, Eric. Thank you.